Let's take a look at most of the MIDI functions found under the MIDI menu. The first one is Merge MIDI and Loop. This basically takes all MIDI parts that are within the left and right locator, or the loop, and merges down all the MIDI data in the inspector window. Tracks that are muted will not be affected. The MIDI data I refer to are the track parameters, the MIDI inserts, and the MIDI sends. If you remember the last video on the Step Designer, this is also how you take the information you create in the Step Designer and apply it to a MIDI part in CUBASE. You may want to turn all these real-time parameters into permanent MIDI data. All you do is turn these both on. There's also a selection that says Erase Destination. If you check this, then it will only have the merged MIDI part remaining. If you don't check mark this, then the merged MIDI part will be placed on top of the original part. You can then move it to another track or use it somewhere else. Dissolve part is great when you have a MIDI part that has multiple MIDI channels in it, like an imported MIDI file. You can also have this to separate a drum track into its individual MIDI notes by separating by pitches. Legato can extend each note to the next note. Fixed length lets us resize all our notes to a specific length that we can set in the quantize section here. Delete doubles deletes any notes that are on the same pitch and are in the same exact position. Sometimes they're hard to see, but you can see this one has a double note. This one? Nope. This one? Nope. Yep, that one too. Let's choose Delete Doubles and get rid of them. Delete Controllers removes any MIDI controller information from a MIDI part. Delete Continuous Controllers is like Delete Controllers, but it doesn't delete on and off events like Sustain Pedal. Delete Notes allows us to delete MIDI events that are too short or are not loud enough, removing those ghost notes that seem to slip in as we play. Restrict Polyphony opens up a dialog that allows us to pick how many voices play at a time. If you have an instrument that has limited voices, you can make sure all the notes get heard. CUBASE does this by shortening the notes as required so they end before the next note starts. Pedals to Note Length scans your MIDI part for sustain on and off events, and then lengthens the affected MIDI notes to match the sustain pedal movements. The sustain controller information is then removed. This feature is not only really cool, but very useful. Delete Overlaps Mono makes sure that no two notes of the same pitch overlap. This can mess up some MIDI instruments if the note on and the note off information is received in the wrong order. Delete Overlaps Poly makes sure that no two notes, regardless of pitch, do not overlap. Velocity allows us to add or subtract velocity note values. You can also compress or expand the MIDI velocities or even limit them. Fixed velocity sets all the velocities to the value entered here. Let's change this to something lower. Reverse inverts the order of the MIDI notes, playing it backwards. The last one is very cool, merge tempo from tapping. If you have freely recorded audio or MIDI and want to match the project tempo to that, you can tap the tempo by recording MIDI notes. Then select the recorded MIDI part, and then select merge tempo from tapping. It's an amazing small little hidden feature that a lot of people miss.